Good afternoon and welcome to today's SEDCOR's webinar. My name is Michael Fowler. I'm CEO at Cabinet Door Service and your SEDCOR board chair. We are glad that you've joined us today. Before we get started, I want to remind you all that we have time saved at the end of the session for questions. Please be sure to use the Q&A feature in Zoom and send your questions, as they can easily get lost if you use the chat feature. So again, please use the Q&A element. Please try and keep your questions brief and direct so that the panel can easily read them. Today, we are excited to bring you a presentation from the incredibly skilled and knowledgeable group that I myself have had the pleasure to work with in the past, Kinesis. At Kinesis, they catalyze the success of businesses by ensuring that they are healthy, scalable, and positioned for growth. Their organization is built on decades of experience working with businesses. Their approach focuses on three key areas proven to accelerate transformation: brand, culture, and business development. They like to take businesses from good to great and from great to remarkable. We have two Kinesis team members joining us today. Allison Tierney, Director of Community Engagement, will be joining us at the second half of the presentation for the Q&A. Allison is a believer in the power of connection, connecting great people to great companies, connecting purpose-driven leaders to the tools that need to be successful, and staying in constant connection with the business community itself. But first, let's welcome Jeff Wester, Creative Director. With more than a decade of strategic marketing experience, Jeff helps business leaders cast visions for growth, as well as create remarkable brand stories and amplification strategies. He believes that strategic thinking allows us to draw on creativity and experience to see opportunities that push our clients towards success. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that wonderful introduction and for having us join you in this group today. It's an exciting time, an exciting opportunity. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Just one second. Okay. Yeah, thank you for that great introduction. Yeah, we're from Kinesis. I'm the creative director there and also a strategist along with my colleague Allison, and we're a fun bunch. We're super passionate about working with purpose-driven businesses who are connected to their community. I feel like that's the best place where we can really create impact in this world and really center on our mission of transformation. And so that's what we always like to start with, is that, yeah, that we're on a mission of transformation. Currently, that's taking a lot of our attention in the realm of work and how we work, how we address our work on the day-to-day, and also how we think about work in the spectrum of humanity and where we're going. Many of the companies that we work with are usually at some kind of like an inflection point. They're either trying to scale up, maybe reach into a new market, trying to maintain their culture as they grow. Sometimes they're handing leadership responsibilities over from maybe a founder onto a team. So lots of restructuring and reorganization. And so that's really the playground we like to play in and work in. And we like that because we understand that fundamental change like that can be really difficult, and that often companies really have a hard time bringing that change to bear, manifesting it within their organization. Having a partner who can help them really focus on it is really helpful. It's also how we're affecting change in the world and how we really see ourselves contributing, because we're really excited about the way the notion of work, the understanding of work in this environment and this culture is changing. And we're a little fired up about it, even though we know it's a little tense moment. And so, clearly we've been hearing a lot of noise and anxiety around workforce issues have been amplifying lately. This sign of McDonald's offering a $200 signing bonus is a good example where we're seeing employers who usually don't have maybe a problem attracting people to work for them are really struggling to find people to work for them, really struggling to retain those people. We're seeing up to 50% turnover rates starting to show up, and people are just not showing up for interviews and things like that. And so it's clear that people are struggling in this area. And we can see it all around us. I mean, anecdotally, my children are in high school, and companies like this are just throwing jobs at them, and they still can't maintain an open status or working maybe a few days a week, or closing down one location to try to support another. It's happening all over. But I also feel really grateful because I feel like this is all a part of something we've been seeing coming and something we've been seeing that we need to work on for a long time. And even though that is what's happening in the culture right now, many of the clients that we work with at Kinesis are actually experiencing the other side of that. They're not experiencing the same kind of trouble and tribulation that seems to be going on. And so kind of as a way to kick things off, I thought I might share some of the things that they're doing and have been doing for quite some time to really address, these things and make a difference. And a big part of it is that they're understanding this concept that it isn't just about kind of the 9-to-5 job or what you're doing with your time when you show up, but that we're really working in a human environment and we need to invest in the humanity of our people. This is a good example of this is Loop. Loop is a revolutionary company of automation engineers. Well, they mainly work on robots, which you like associate that with like the top tier technology in the world, but actually the industry of automation is pretty old school. The same robots have been building those cars for 30 years. And so, David and his leadership team realized that even though they could continue to like sell parts to people who needed to fix their old robots, and that was making them money, it wasn't really giving them the work of their dreams. They really wanted to be pushing forward the potential of automation. They wanted to be doing new and exciting things. And they also realized that even though they make robots, the real secret sauce, the real power of Loop is this radical team, which you can see here at a smaller size of when we started with them from where they are now. And they're really guided by this mission of revolution. They're seeking to bring revolution into the way they work with software and the way they work with automation, the way they work with companies. You can see on the background here, murals. This is 2 out of 7 murals that are on their wall demonstrating their values. And they really invest a lot in how we approach work because they understand that they want to create a place where people can bring their best creative selves and really geek out over the work and really get things done. And so as the pandemic has carried on, they are not in the same struggle. And in fact, even though the automation industry and engineering is notoriously hard to recruit in and attract and retain talent, they're having a lot of people kind of flooding them with applications, people who are looking to work for them, even though they're not offering a specific role. Some of them even choosing a less of a pay than they would be getting at some big, automation manufacturer, because what this team is doing is so revolutionary and cool. They want to get their hands on it. And so even though a lot of people are saying workforce right now, this realization that they wanted to create a very human company where people could come and deliver their best work and that they wanted to invest in that environment, you can see here it's had long-term effect that while lots of people are really struggling to find employees and retain them, they're doing a great job at that. It's going even further. Another company that we often work with who's also done a really great job in this avenue and really seeing positive results is Pratt Larson. Pratt Larson makes some of the most luxurious and sought after handmade tile in the world. Their products featured in homes by people like Robert Downey Jr. and in all the top kind of home fashion magazines. But what they understand about themselves is that the secret that makes this tile unique and glorious, besides its wonderful appearance and its presence in your home, is that it's created by this team of alchemists and magicians who are really in love with tile. I mean, they have what they call tile dreams, where they're always looking at the tile all around them and just fascinated by it. Here in the center of this giant shot, you see Belle and Anthony, and they're the owners of Pratt Larson. A number of years ago, when the original owners decided that it was time for them to retire, they had the opportunity to sell the company to a much larger manufacturing company. But the fear that it would degrade what really made this company great, the people within it, and the family environment and everything they have going on, really made that impossible. And so Belle and Anthony came forward to take ownership of the company. They'd both collectively worked there for over 20 years. And so they really knew how it was going. Anthony was working there almost from the beginning of the company starting out. And so, they have done a ton to really help these people understand their part in the company. It's a really unique working environment. Their building is 3 stories tall, and a single piece of tile has to pass through up to 12 stations. And each station kind of adds something to it or does something to it, but not a single person in that chain really sees the finished product. They're always just seeing a part of it going past them, spraying a little bit on. And so in order to keep that vision alive, in order to keep this team like really honed and straightforward, they've really invested in what life is like here at Pratt Larson. They've done a ton to really create open communications, to do things like open book financial reviews with their company so that the whole team can understand really how does the money work here and like how does this all relate to each other. They're creating like transparent pay bands and things where people can really understand where they are and like the mix of the company. Oftentimes that comes with a little added education, because you'd be surprised how many people don't have kind of a basic acumen around financial information and data. And so there's an opportunity there for them to learn and to grow as contributors to a business and as to an organization where they all have a part. Their efforts can go as far as daily yoga, which is what this funny picture is from, where every day they kind of start out doing some stretches and making room for this, because it's a very physically demanding job. They're often picking up heavy things and moving them around. And so they want to make sure that they're experiencing goodness there. And the goodness has paid off. I mean, they're having a wonderful time finding and attracting people, different than Loop, which is kind of like that higher tier thought work, engineering job. These are the kind of jobs that like almost anyone could kind of come into and apply for. And so they're employing a lot of people who are just starting out in their career, or they need a job, but they don't have a specific career in mind. And if they love it there, they find their purchase there, and they can really move and flow, within the company. One thing they did was really awesome when the pandemic came along that was great, is that they actually made their location a vaccination station, so they could give the people who work there and their families ready and easy access for the vaccination. And it helped a ton. They've been able to stay open throughout this entire pandemic. They've really committed and doubled down on the safety of their people. And an unintended result of that is that we recently heard that it was actually able to cut down the cost of their insurance payouts in terms of taking care of people who've had injuries and things like that by half. And so the way it contributes to the organization is absolutely clear. And what we like to say is that even though it feels really hard right now, what we've felt like for a long time is that this isn't really a crisis of labor shortage. This is really a movement to transform work. This is an opportunity for us to understand how we got into this mess so that we can create new ways out of it. Because the same approaches that got us here are not going to take us out of it. And so when we can start to understand why this is important for us to address, beyond any specific political issues, beyond anything like that, there's actually some really important reasons why we need to look at the engagement of our employees and how they're feeling about their work and their job on the day-to-day basis. If you look at the data around what contributes to the success of the business, whether that be financial success or networking success, or even just excellence on the floor of a manufacturing floor, the key data point that comes through over and over again is in employee engagement. And we're getting to the point where we cannot even think about the success of a company anymore without thinking about this niche of very, very important information. Companies who have engaged employees experience all kinds of benefits that are really important. For example, they can experience up to 22% higher profitability than other companies where the employees are not engaged. Companies that have an unengaged workforce also experience 64% fewer safety incidences. Safety incidences are hugely expensive, and this is like cutting that down by more than half, and really making a huge impact on the financial well-being of a company. We also see 41% fewer quality defects, which means work goes out right the first time and doesn't have to be redone over and over again. We see 43% lower turnover, so people are not leaving their jobs as actively, and this data is up to date, meaning this just came out pretty much like a few days ago, that people who are in engaged workforces are not leaving their jobs the way other people are. And finally, 81% lower absenteeism, which is a huge, huge number that people right now, one of the things we're hearing is a lot of complaint of new people coming on and just not showing up or kind of giving up after a few days. And what we're seeing is when a company invests in engaging with those people, that number flips dramatically over on the other side. And there's way more data about this than they can even fit on a slide or not bore people with. But what it means is that everything that we look at and every way that we evaluate what will really drive success for a business. Employee engagement is just the number one thing we should be looking at. It's the number one thing that's going to actually pay us back. It's the number one thing that's going to create health and wellness in our communities, and we will feel the effect across every measurable spectrum of our work. The irony of all that is that we are horrible at this. When we talk about this, we need to keep in mind that pretty much since they've been measuring it, employee engagement has been nearly at a static number. It's at its highest rate right now, holding at 36%. If you want to look at that another way, you can't just say 36%. You have to admit that 64% of the country hates their job. that essentially what this is showing us is that when people are showing up at work, more than half of us, well, almost into the 70%, we're not there for the right reasons. We don't want to be there. People are not happy with their job. And so if you remember all those ways in which a business is impacted by that, these are all the ways in which we're losing opportunity. And that if we change our mind around thinking about people as someone who just needs to come and work for us and shift to an idea of what opportunity is in front of us, that means that there's 64% of the population waiting to get engaged, just waiting to get on board with something, but they're just not given anything that they can latch on to. And so the opportunity in front of us is to create that. So start thinking of it differently so we can create those opportunities, recapture these people's minds and their imagination. And unfortunately, in an environment where hating your job is the norm, I mean, that's kind of been the norm as long as I've been working, people are just constantly complaining about it. Then we got hit with a pandemic that acts as this huge amplifier. If you were unhappy with your job before, you hate it now. And in many ways, we're amplifying not just the stress that we're feeling at work, not just the massive change or the social unrest of our country, we're also managing exposure. I'm sitting here, you're looking at my lightsaber collection. I'm a huge Star Wars fan, but I don't have any way of hiding that now. We have a computer in my room, got a camera in my room, people are on their phones. We're more networked than ever. And so even people who we thought were exempt, like celebrities, are getting called out for being poor employers. For not doing their best they can to engage with their employees. And in fact, when they're being abusive, they're actually getting called out and pulled to the front. And so and you don't need to look very far to really understand that people have struggled with this for a long time. There's been internet memes dedicated to struggling with your job just for years. Here's some that I just found recently. Things I hate about my job. 1, getting out of bed. 2, people. 3, working. Here's another one of a woman vacuuming a desert. When your boss comes around the corner and you grab the closest thing to you to make it look like you're working. Or finally, when people ask how I handled this job, and here's this image of Michael Scott from The Office, I'm dead inside. And unfortunately, when people talk about their jobs, all this data is showing us that this is how they feel. And so, in the world where we're trying to find and attract people, we got to flip this energy. We got to get to another mindset so that people are actually not just accepting work, but excited to buy in and be engaged around the job. And this has been a long problem. This is a new version of a problem that's been going on for a long time, ever since the Industrial Revolution, where we've kind of culturally taken on this improper assumption that people and companies can be managed better as machines than as human enterprises or organizations. What it's led to is just a complete mismanagement of the humanity involved in the work that we're doing. We struggle in business with things like women becoming pregnant or people having sick kids or going through medical issues. All of these things provide huge disruptions to our systems because our systems are not really built around humanity. Instead, we're squeezing each other into these little boxes. And I don't know about you, but I'm not a box shape, even though I'm in this box here on Zoom. The box does not reflect the world I live in or the work that I do. Businesses operate much more like coordinated organisms or teams. And so we need to move away from these sort of mechanistic, machine-like approaches and start to understand that humanity needs to be core and key to what we're doing as we go forth from here. And it's going to take new ways of thinking to get there. We can't keep relying on best practices, for example, because those are the established ideas that led us into this problem. We've got to find new education around what is actually driving success for a company and trying to understand what new things can we try, not just writing up new job descriptions or really dealing with things in the short term, but how can we flip our mind around how we think about work? Does the business exist to extract from the people who work from it, or does the business exist to provide them opportunity as well? At Kinesis, we've long had the philosophy that when you think of the customer, you are talking about your internal team. You use the same tools of marketing to attract and retain employees as you do to attract and retain customers. And so, if we can flip our mind to that place, we find new opportunities that I think in the current mindset maybe feel like a sacrifice, but in the long term, you can see they're really the point of all this. Some examples of people who are already doing that, already rethinking the game out in the world, besides the ones we've already shared with you, not connected to Kinesis. Here's a guy that most people probably know, Dan Price. He's the owner of Gravity Forms. Pretty unremarkable company. If you know who this person is, you don't know it because the company itself is doing anything that cool. They do POS transactions at the grocery store when you buy something. But he made a big splash in the news because a number of years ago, he basically raised the minimum wage at his company, the minimum payment to $70,000 a year, no matter what anybody did at the company. And this made a huge splash. He got a lot of press that was both negative and positive. A lot of people accused him of being a showman and just doing this as a stunt. A lot of economists came forward to say, this is not a surviving model. You can't build a business this way. And actually, the opposite has happened. He's actually been very successful. The company's done really well. And the part of the story that doesn't get told quite often is that when the pandemic hit, this company was hit very hard. They were hit with many of the challenges that some of the people on this call may be facing or out in the world are facing, where suddenly over half of what they did just disappeared. People weren't going shopping in stores anymore. They weren't using those POS systems that they support anymore. And so the advice he was given, the rhetoric at the time was, it's time for layoffs. You can't support this system where you're paying everybody so much unless you lay people off or you lower their pay. But Dan had already created a culture where the team was a part of this. He had already created a culture where people were coming together. And so when this happened, he didn't just make a decision and roll it out. He went to his team and showed them, here's the situation we're in. Here's the mess we're dealing with. I need your help figuring out how to solve this. I don't know how to solve it. And people started coming forth with ideas. Some people who were thinking about retiring pulled the trigger. Okay, it's time for me to retire. Some people admitted that they didn't need all that money, that for a little bit they could take a lowered income and that would be okay. People all volunteered to go on furlough, to do alternating work cycles. All kinds of ideas came forward. And the result was, by implementing them, they didn't have to lay people off through the pandemic. And then when stores started opening up again, they were one of the only companies that does what they do who had a staff. And so all that business, even competitor business, started to come to them, and they've just been booming. And he keeps sharing the good and spreading that out to his team as he continues to grow and thrive. We felt a little of this goodness ourselves at Kinesis. We've been experimenting. I like to say that working at Kinesis is like working in a grand experiment because almost everything we do for any one of our customers, we end up trying on ourselves first. In our efforts to produce a more human environment, we've had one thing that really has come through is that we have parents on the team. I'm a parent. I have 3 children, school age. I have high school and middle school. Allison, our team, has a couple of kids, and there's other people as well. And so when the pandemic hit and the kids were taken out of school, all of a sudden, we had to make some decisions. Lucky for us, one of the things that happened was our office got shut down. We couldn't go to work in the building anyway, and we weren't using it. Everyone was doing remote. And so we converted it to a school. We brought on a tutor, and the kids were all doing remote work anyway. And so we set them up in distance stations. There's a couple more stations off camera here where other kids are sitting and learning school to give these parents an opportunity to stay focused at work and to really be committed to what we're doing without fearing that they're neglecting their children or not helping them get through school. And our goal really was just to support the team. We wanted to make sure that the people who we really love and care about, the people who really mean so much to this company, can give their attention and time to what we're doing to really contribute their passions. But like a lot of these investments in employee engagement, what ends up happening is that you end up getting all these unexpected returns. Among them, first off, we've started to investigate a model here that we can start to explore with other companies who have a similar problem around trying to make sure that parents can stay engaged. But as well, we got some public attention we weren't expecting. Somehow the New York Times kind of got word of this, and we got featured there in the New York Times, which led to both applicants and businesses expressing interest in us, wanting to understand what we're doing and how we can work together. And again, it wasn't the expectation. It wasn't what we were trying to put out into the world, but it's really just a really positive example of what happens when you start to prioritize employee engagement and really drive that. And so that's really why we talk about this in terms of recruiting with purpose, recruiting with meaning, because I think what we're experiencing now is this shift. The movement is coming and work is transforming. And as we go forward, acknowledging the fact that the future of work is human is going to get us into new places. We need to start thinking of new ways where we can create organizations where humans can thrive and show up and really show us their best, and where we can reward them for that in positive and powerful ways that are, like a virtuous cycle, something where we're depending and leaning on each other. So yeah, I'm excited. This isn't, in our mind, we're seeing this struggle. There's undeniably a tension, but it's really a tension of opportunity. This is less of a crisis where we're looking at this as what switch can we flip? What dial can we turn to get a change? And it's more of an opportunity to embrace this movement to transform the way we work. Thank you very much. And I'm gonna turn this off here. And I know we had potentially some time for Q&A and conversation.
Yeah, so I wanted to encourage everybody to start submitting some questions, and we can be monitoring that. So we can have some questions for Jeff. And hi, I'm Allison, by the way, with Kinesis. So it's good to be here, and thanks for tuning in. Jeff, maybe one question I have that sparked for me when you were sharing the examples of Pratt Larson and Loop and even Kinesis, and you touched on the one word mission idea. So Kinesis is transformation, and at Loop it's revolution. You know, and I think that's a really thinking about your mission and values might be a really important place to even start when you're thinking about how do you create an engaged workforce. So maybe you can talk a little bit about a one word mission and kind of the philosophy and idea around that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And when he starts talking about what like specific tools do we have to begin that process of really engaging with people, that's usually the first tool we like to draw upon is your mission and your values. And what we like to say is, you know, your mission is your driving purpose. You all the way back to Daniel Pink and like, why are people at work at all? And how do you get people to really show up as their best? You got to give them purpose, autonomy, and mastery. And so really that purpose starts with that mission. You know, as you said, Loop is on a mission of revolution. That means every decision they make, they start with, is this a revolutionary decision? You know, Pratt Larson is on a mission of enrichment. They're trying to enrich the lives of the people that they work with, both as customers and also as the team that is on their team. And so that helps to guide them in this conversation of what does it mean to engage our people? And I know that like mission and values can often become a thing that gets decided off into a room with a few leaders and then maybe put on a poster, but really being sure to engage people in conversations around why are we here? Like, what are we here to do? And how are we getting there is a big thing. Specifically at Kinesis, we found the one word mission to be valuable because oftentimes a long worded mission statement that just kind of goes on, even if it's accurate, it can become less meaningful the longer it exists. I stop looking at it, I'm not memorizing it, and it's not relevant. But when you just say something simple like our mission is transformation, I can form personal connections to that. And then as a team, we can engage in conversations around what that means to us. How have you seen transformation show up in your work? How have you experienced transformation with a customer lately? And it's a great place to start in that work.
Thanks, Jeff. So we have a question from Abisha. Thanks for submitting that, Abisha. She says, as you mentioned, it can be difficult for companies to shift thinking. What can or should they do to get this process started? And I totally agree with that. It's definitely a mind shift that needs to happen. And Jeff, you touched on it, of like what the tactics and the things that we once did aren't going to work moving forward. And so how do you start kind of getting your hands wrapped around that idea?
Totally. Yeah, I see your note in here in the chat and asking for kind of those 3 bullet points. I'll do my best. One is just when we think about engagement, think about what engages you is like conversation, direct engagement, and interaction around the things that matter most. And so, you know, as we said, the mission is a great place to start because you got to get to the heart of why you're here. What's worth the hard work and worth celebrating when things go right? And so then what can you call people to so that they can identify, and then figuring out how to like make that part of everything you're doing all the time. It's hard work, but in terms of how you start it, it starts with conversations. The other bullet point that I would put up there is once your vision is in place, the next thing we usually recommend to people is to work on their values. And even though values can get really highly publicized, almost to the point where we kind of treat them with differentiation, values are really important when you keep them concise as decision-making tools. You know, one of the values we have at Kinesis is, you know, build to last. And so that directly affects how I respond to requests from my team or requests from customers or decisions we have to make going out into what we do. And so if you can gain consensus with your team around your mission and your values, that's a great platform to begin talking about how we do these things. Another thing that we're seeing a lot of companies embrace is, you know, once you get into that mind shift that like, we're all in this together, then you start exploring ways to bring people together. So things like working agreements, you know, oftentimes we talk about the way we work in the framework of a job description, which is usually reviewed at the beginning of the work and then never really touched again. So how can we create clarity around what's actually happening day to day, that are the things that happen in the meaningful work, rather than a job description, which is sort of an idea about what a job might be. And so creating opportunity for teams to start to build their own structures and their own way of approaching the work. I think what you find is that they often provide the best advice on things like how to get things done faster, or how to like maybe skip a step, or how to improve a process that's really been grinding for a long time.
Yeah, Jeff, and I think to your point too, and you touched on this, the Dan Price story, was that he went and asked, like, talked to his people. And he asked, what do we need to do? How can we all kind of come together to find the solution? And that was, I think, the same thing with Kinesis when we went to the parents and said, what can we do to support you during this time with your kids? And so I think that, you know, you can always make a lot of assumptions about what's going on with your employees, but I think that the best path to success there is just to start talking to the individual and saying, okay, what do you need as an individual, as a human, and how can we support you and have you really, you know, continue to stay here?
Yeah, if I had to add a bullet point to that, it'd be transparency.
Yeah.
Ways in which you can create transparency. And I think a lot of times organizations might fear transparency, but it just shows to be a very positive thing across the board. If you have people who are aligned with you and your vision and your values, then you get a lot of opportunity for people to contribute that way. And often what they express is like a desire to understand. I mean, one of the things we mentioned about Pratt Larson is the open book financial book conversation that they have. Tons of companies that we work with have benefited from that kind of a platform, because it can often answer ahead of time any misgivings someone has in the bubble of their own job about how they matter to the whole company or what's going on in terms of pay. I do see another question here I'd love to answer or kind of touch on.
This is from Miles at Buildable, and so he's asking, how do you see smaller companies working in the same industry as larger employers compete for talent? And I think some stories around Loop might be a good place to start, but compensation won't be the same. So how can you compete with the same talent pool when the options are as plentiful as they have been in recent memory, which is so true, Miles. So thanks for asking that.
I love this question, because to me, this is the question, right? It's like, we often look at these bigger companies as like, well, they're successful, I'll do what they do, or I'm going to try to, do their thing. And if you kind of come back to your mission, I think that's where you find that breakthrough. So many of the companies we work with are in this spot. They're pulling on, Loop is a great example. The engineers that they're pulling on are being offered big lucrative contracts in other countries. They'll fly you to Germany, kind of opportunities. And yet, many of the people who've been coming onto their company recently have agreed to Loop's pay, which is much smaller, but still great, right? They're still paying people a thriving wage. Just they can't offer the gigantic number of zeros that this bigger corporation is offering. And that does sometimes become a crux point, but it's also a great point for conversation. Is ultimately what Loop is doing is pursuing their purpose. And so if you go to their website or you go to their page, you see them leaking that purpose out all over the place. They're putting up videos of like new technology that they're exploring and experiencing. At one point we did like a live stream show, very kind of in this format, where we showed a project coming together. And it was like pretty nerdy stuff. Like I was there and I can't pretend to understand all the software nuances, but the end result, and actually this is kind of a funny thing, is like when we were doing that show, we were getting regular live feed questions like these from a specific person who had the moniker of Bones Jackson as their name. And then recently we heard that there was a new hire and they were really stoked about them. And it came out after he had already come on board that he's Bones Jackson. He was the one who was asking all those really interesting questions to the Loop team. And he had a big lucrative job. He didn't need to come to Loop. And so he wasn't there for the money. He's there for what's going on. And again, they're a unique opportunity because they're offering engineering jobs and that kind of space. But even a company like Pratt Larson or some of the other companies that we're working with, when you start engaging people around, it's not just how you're spending your time. It's like, what are you here to do? How can we pull you into contributing to this conversation? We find that projecting those things, getting that values and that mission out into the world in not just words, but in like visible ways people can communicate with, does a much better job of attracting people who really want to do something meaningful with their life.
Jeff, I think we've talked a lot about mission and values, but I think something that ties into this is vision. And so somebody like Bones Jackson, who comes to Loop, who's left a pretty lucrative job to come to a smaller company, I think that understanding the vision of Loop and where that company is going and what's possible and the potential for growth is probably really exciting to an individual like that. So if you think about your organization, whether you're in manufacturing or construction, or in technology, thinking about what does the future hold for your company and how can you get people really excited about becoming a part of that. I know that was how I started at Kinesis 10 years ago, was we were 3 people at the time, and I got really stoked on kind of the vision that Sean, our founder, had for the business, and that's what's really kept me and motivated me for these years.
Yeah. I want to answer this next question too. So
yeah, go ahead. So Abhishek has a question here of what do you find is the biggest barrier to our business partners undertaking this change approach? Is it existing culture or capacity or something else?
It's all of those things. Yes. It really is. One of the reasons we do the work we do is because that can be a very nuanced situation to deal with. I would say that oftentimes when we can identify what's getting in the way, one of the first things is best practices. I already kind of threw this under the bus a little bit, but when we get into business, we're often encouraged to go and look at the success of successful businesses and to apply those to our business. And often what happens is we hear the stories of the humongous, the Apples and the Googles and the Fortune 500 companies. Similar to the question about recruiting, we can't apply those same tactics because we don't have a multi-campus situation with thousands of people working for us in the top technology. We've got like 10 people in a machine shop. And so that wisdom is not always applicable to small business. And in fact, it's often done under a misassumption or a mistake, that thinking that showing that successful story is a success story that other people can take on, without showing how maybe those things they didn't work for other companies. Maybe 8 of the other companies that tried that didn't succeed, and there was some weird X factor about this company that made that possible that we can't touch. But often because people are looking to certainty and to clear answers, they'll jump right to like a best practice or like an established way of thinking. And one of the things we need right now is a new way of thinking that is not as restricted, right? There's opportunity outside the realm of the known. And what I've often said is that a best practice can only tell you what has been done or what can be done based on our previous knowledge, but it's not forward thinking. And when you actually look at the statistics of business success, it's actually quite low. Most businesses, especially small businesses, don't make it above like a $5 million point. So the idea that there actually are best practices is kind of a misnomer anyway. They're actually the stories of 1 to 2 successes out of gobs of people trying the same thing and not winning. But also the other thing that can happen that's actually a huge blocker is change itself is hard. Again, coming back to the fact that we are humans, we are resistant to change. Just psychologically, it is viewed in our brain as like a threat. And with enough fear wrapped around change, it can actually cause cellular death in your brain. It's pretty extreme. And so much of the work that we're doing and much of the work that's required is change management. It's trying to understand what do humans need to go through a change like this. What's ironic about that is that if that's where your mind is at, you've already begun the work because you're already trying to think of how can we create a more human experience in this place. And then the other thing I would point out, I'm talking a lot, but the other barrier I often see is eagerness, pace, lack of patience. We want it done now. We want it, I want to pull the lever and have 5 new perfect fit clients show up. There's a certain kind of pace anxiety that goes on, but this is a long-term problem. These are things that we want to address that hopefully create like thriving existing places for people to work. And this doesn't happen overnight. It takes a long time.
Yeah. And I think to add to that, Jeff, too, is that, a lot of this is really overwhelming as an owner or as an executive of a company, because you're also just trying to keep the lights on every day. And so this is a lot to think about. And so I guess a message to leaders out there is like, you don't have to do this alone. And we have a client of ours that he has, he is self-acknowledged that some of this employee engagement and soft stuff is really not his cup of tea. Like it is not the place that he is, that's his strength necessarily. And he's a great coach and he's a great motivator and he can train his team to do the job. But when it comes to really sitting down and having some of those tough conversations or really get to what makes, them want to have a more human experience, so, I don't know if I'm the best person for that. And when we say that's okay, who on your team might be interested in taking a leadership role in this area? Or how can we find ways to really, leverage your strengths, but leverage other strengths of people on your team who might be ready to engage with the team in a different way, and start empowering others in your organization to take a leadership role in that.
It's not in the main Q&A chat, but I had another question kind of come across of asking for some specific examples of what the tile company did, so Pratt Larson did, to engage the day-to-day production folks. So yeah, we're talking about people who potentially are sweeping floors. A lot of people who come into Pratt Larson are putting things in a box. Like, they don't have a lot of tile experience. They go into shipping. Yeah, the things they've done to create a remarkable experience around that are it's hard for me to catalog them as bullet points a company can try, but I'll give you my best effort on some of the things we've worked on over the time. First off was what we call people. Names, titles, things like that are important. And so, in job postings and stuff like that, saying, labor staff, part-time worker, willing to do whatever. We give this impression that this job that we're offering these people doesn't matter. And the reason we want someone to do it is because we don't want to do it. We need someone to do all the stuff that sucks. And so we can flower that up. But what we've done a lot of work with Pratt Larson around, and as well as other people, is actually rethink the job, not just the job description. What would be remarkable about that job? And so a couple of things that they've done is they go, well, if we can't offer something remarkable, where can we remove friction? One of the areas where they found a lot of positivity is employing people who have hearing disability. And so they brought in some sign language interpreters to work with them on team meetings and things that are important, as well as people who speak Spanish or other languages. They often will bring in like an interpreter to make sure that they can contribute and be heard and be seen. That's often just a big part of the kind of this area of work. They also, it starts with that mind shift. Are you bringing people into your organization, or are you trying to hire someone to do a job? And so because they're bringing people into the organization, those people get just as much time and attention on their career path and how they're growing in the company as anyone else on the team. Even the tile makers came in through the same door. And so they're regularly touched on from their people champion, which is kind of how they've redefined HR, and really created initiatives around engaging those people and not just kind of giving them work and then walking away. So things like stay interviews, opportunities for them to voice where they see opportunity. Often people start to find they love a thing or they love a path when maybe they didn't know they loved at first. And so as they experience things and growing things, they're given opportunity to move around a lot within the company, which is really nice.
I think on the safety changes side of things, I think it helped that Anthony and Belle both had been working at Pratt Larson, and every job you could probably imagine, over 20-year career there. And so as they became owners and leaders within the company, the ability to kind of walk around and start asking some questions and asking about how processes were being done, buying some new equipment that needed to be invested in that was going to help the team. But again, it was more of just getting to going and asking the employees, what is it that you need? What would make your job better? What would make your job safer? And as they started implementing some of these different processes and operations, just a natural kind of outcome of that was the reduce in safety incidents, and so a reduction there, which then translated into dollars in their pockets of ways that they were able to start saving money and take care of their people.
Yeah, and one other thing that really stands out as you were saying that too was that along with them specifically as a person in their role, they do a lot to create affinity of teams. And so, they've got a 12 station process. And so each of these stations kind of has their own DNA. The sprayers have kind of an attitude and a way they approach the work versus the tile makers. And so no matter what department you're in, that department has like a leader, and it has like an opportunity for you to talk and engage in that little micro community. And one of the things we did when we were working with them on their brand development was kind of gave them little icons. So we came up with all these little glyph systems that if you go on their website at any time, you'll see them floating around all over. And we came up with these unique glyphs for each department within the company. And the team loved these glyphs so much, we put them on a big t-shirt where they're all kind of like in a big row, that they actually got the files from us, and they they put them into tile. And so now in every section of the company, you can go in there and see the little glyph hanging on the wall for that department. And it's just another way for them to connect, right? And to feel like I'm a part of something.
Yeah, we have a question from Lyle here. How do you attract new employees to visit your website or entice them to apply? That's a great question, and I think touching on some employer branding.
Yeah, yes, thank you. You took the words right out of my mouth. Employer branding. One of the first things we say to people all the time is think like a marketer. Marketing is a situation where maybe you're trying to entice someone to buy your product instead of someone else's. And it's a very interesting, similar energy when you're trying to entice someone to look at you and your company and dig in, maybe in spite of someone else's. And so, some of the near-term or short-term things that you can do, kind of that tourniquet approach we were talking about at the beginning of like, what do we do now, is like, just look at your job descriptions. That's a big part of it. Does this sound like a job a person would want, to work at? Oftentimes that's just the first place to think about it. If in the case that you're not getting people in that, maybe rethink the job. We've had times where a job just wasn't filled. And so that was an opportunity for us as a team to evaluate, maybe this isn't a meaningful piece of work. What would make it meaningful? Like what would make it something we can actually embrace? And so a lot of what I would say around that really comes down to how you're communicating out and what you're saying to people on the outside. Oftentimes, another thing I see is most of the communications going out are about hiring. We're hiring, we're looking for people, but companies, Loop is a great example of this, probably just the most notable on my mind. They're constantly talking about what's interesting to them, right? I'm trying to invite you into my culture and into my world. And so they're talking not just about automation, but like, I think this week they posted a video where one of their engineers designed his own wallet and cut it out on a CNC machine. Has almost nothing to do with what they do, but he was engineering his lifestyle, which is one of his values. So he felt empowered to make a video about that. And that gets the attention, not just of applicants, it gets the attention of people who are like him, who also are engineering their own wallets. And like one of the other people on the team laser cut some cookies. It doesn't always have to be about what the company is. It can often be about like what is firing us up, what's giving us passion.
Mm-hmm. And I think you have to use some of these same tactics too in order to prevent employees from leaving and going to your competition. And we see that happening quite a bit too. So, thinking about how can you create a really meaningful place of work that people are really invested in and that they get excited about being at every day, right? And I think as silly as it can be sometimes like a t-shirt with your values on it, it is meaningful to an employee to feel like they're part of a team. And I know that being part of a team can often feel challenging, especially in a remote environment, which many of us are in. But that if you can still look for ways to really bring people together, to connect, to form those relationships, it just makes folks, I think, feel a little bit more loyal to staying, so that even if they get offered $1 more at a different company down the street, that they feel more likely to stay.
Totally. Yeah, another positive thing, it takes a little more work, is really fleshing out employee journey concepts, employee journey charts, or employee journey mapping, because often people are just curious about, so I start here, where could I go? What could I possibly do? And so helping them to understand how they can continue to contribute even beyond, that doesn't just help with new applicants, it helps with people who are already in the company to understand where they can actually meet needs as needs come up that are aligned with their passions.
Mm-hmm. All right. Any last questions from the audience, or even, we have one that just popped in from Jeremy Gordon. Do you have any suggestions about how public sector employers can reduce stigma of government jobs being bureaucratic and hierarchical? Ooh, that's some employer branding challenges.
That is a challenge. Yeah, I think in most cases where this is, we call this like the brand gap. If there's an experience people are having at a company, so like in this case, Jeremy, if your experience is that public sector is actually an engaging environment where cool work is getting done, then the point there would be to focus on that and create exposure around that, rather than to diminish the other voice. You don't need to create a whole campaign saying we're not bureaucratical, but how can you shift the other way? What are the meaningful things that this organization is doing together? What are the opportunities that people are finding, in this space? What is it you find awesome about this public sector work? I mean, to me, one thing that's always powerful about that sector is that there's passion built in. If people are trying to get involved in government, in local infrastructure, they usually care a lot. And so what else is going on besides just the shape of the work?
Yeah, and I think it's important that employees and employers and government workers, I mean, if you have a positive experience in an environment, share that, talk about it, be transparent, and tell those stories that helps others understand the important work that is getting done and the passion that's behind it. And I think oftentimes, a lot of recruitment can happen via your existing employees and bringing in friends and families of your existing team. And so the more that they can be talking about what a wonderful place to work at, that your environment is, and what the opportunities are and how they're being treated, I think that goes a long ways, and will you might start seeing that flywheel effect of other people getting interested in getting involved. Okay. Any last questions from the audience? I had a couple on my notes, but I think you answered all of them because they were such good questions today. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for all the great questions and comments. I feel like, we're really excited to see where this can take us as a culture, and the opportunities that really embracing the humanity of our people will give us. I know that I want to have a job where I feel like a human. I know you want to have a job where you feel empowered to be your best human self. And so, yeah, thanks for inviting us to come and share with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff, and Allison. And we're always happy to have our friends at Kinesis join us, and we've yet to have a conversation that hasn't left us thinking about how we can improve ourselves even here at SEDCOR, and also how we work with our business partners, and in some cases even some public sector partners that we heard from in the Q&A today. So thank you for some good stories. Good examples. We, as an economic development organization, we are getting brought into a lot of different kinds of conversations I think are relatively new and maybe even surprising to some of our leadership and our members when it comes to questions on how to help with daycare facilities, how to help with housing, employee housing, how we can effectively identify opportunities for transportation assistance, and encouraging commuting, and even, we've been doing this for a long time, but even the connectivity around workforce pipelines and working with school districts, I think, kind of shows us like we kind of go all over the place, arguably, but every one of those things are really, it's because we want to really try to provide industry-driven resources and responses. So that's, and this is what the industry is telling us. We better make those connections with transportation folks and with schools and daycare providers, and really try to understand what the resources are to help facilitate those types of resources for businesses. So thank you, very much on point today. On behalf of SEDCOR, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us as well. Please keep up to date on our future events by checking out our website under events. The website's right there. Every Friday afternoon, we generally get an email out that kind of has a summary of latest news and other reports. So keep an eye out your inboxes for that. And if it's anything like my inbox, it will be in your junk file. So be sure to take extra care. If you're not seeing our messages, you may need to look there. Also, we're active on social media. The address is shown on the screen right now. Our next event will be our annual awards program, which we will have in person at noon on December 15th at the Salem Convention Center. And please watch your email for registration information coming soon. And we still are looking for nominations. Nominations are still open for our awards. It's an opportunity for us to really celebrate the diversity of employers and manufacturers, and some of the cool things that are being made and done in this region. And we encourage you all to kind of look around you and see where who needs some recognition and who deserves some recognition. There's a lot of innovative things happening in the region, and particularly among our traded sector manufacturing folks. And this is an opportunity to put a spotlight on that. So please, keep an eye out for that and keep those nominations coming. With that, I hope you enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, and thank you again for joining us, and for our veterans and their families out there. Happy Veterans Day tomorrow, and we will talk to you soon. Thanks.